Welcome to Bamfordrose and another question of the week. In this week's question of the week, it's another visit to the endless comments that you'll see online about the emissions service warning lamp coming on your dashboard, and if that happens to you, what to do about it. I think we've done enough on this one in the past, because the message is to have a decent fault code reader, plug that in, find out exactly what the fault code is that's triggering the error light, determine if that's something that can be ignored and reset and the light goes away, or through knowledge figure out if that code is something that needs further diagnostic by someone that knows what they're doing. And fortunately, there are good souls out there that on forums post that message. The reason for this week's question of the week on the subject is that people continually ask me, well, do I just go out and give the car a damn good thrashing? And that's because, as these two examples show, there are still people out there suggesting that if you drive the car hard, or go and drive it like you stole it, then somehow the thinking, if there was any, must be that that sort of Italian tune-up solves the problem. More often than not, the check emissions light is because of the lambda sensor diagnostics. It can be for many other reasons. Perhaps the fuel tank cap isn't properly on. It could be, in 2022, driving along the road, that you've got a mass airflow imbalance from one side of the engine to the other being recorded, typically because that workshop that has marble floors and glass fronts hasn't changed your air filters since 2010. But mostly it's because of the lambda sensor diagnostics. The lambda sensors perform two jobs. Firstly, they check that the engine is running the correct air-fuel ratio at all times, or correct lambda value at all times. And then the downstream sensor checks that the catalyst has actually converted some very harmful to the environment gases, and that what's being put out the tailpipe is not harmful gases at all to the environment. There are several diagnostic checks done on each sensor to make sure it's working perfectly. All of those diagnostic checks are legislative requirements, and if each sensor fails the diagnostic, then the light must be put on the dashboard. So the checks are: is the sensor electrically connected to the harness? This is a check done to make sure that the engine control unit, the ECU, can see the sensor. The next check is that the heater circuit is running okay. The sensor tip is going to be measuring really hot exhaust gas, and if the sensor tip was cold, the exhaust gas very hot, that thermal shock would crack in time the sensor and it would fail. So the sensor as a heater element, and the heater working properly, is also a function that's monitored. When the engine changes its fueling value, it either goes rich or lean, and it will switch its fueling value richer than lambda 1 or leaner than lambda 1 to get the catalyst to work properly. That square wave switch is measured in terms of time and frequency, and if the engine management system knew that it was switching lambda but it wasn't getting that square wave signal back in return, then it will ping a diagnostic for slow response. The other two codes, other two reasons the lambda sensor will come on is if because it's stuck rich. This means there's an excess of fuel which the engine management system cannot reduce the fueling and get the air-fuel ratio back to 14.5 to 1 or lambda 1, or the inverse of that is running stuck lean. This is where there'll be an air leak, the engine is sucking in unmetered air, and the engine management system can't put in enough fuel to return the air-fuel ratio back to lambda 1 or 14.5 to 1. So stuck rich, stuck lean, slow response, heater circuit, electrically connected. Those are all the fault codes to do with the lambda sensor. Now, 9 times out of 10 when your check engine light comes on, it's going to be for one of those reasons. And for the engine management system to perform a diagnostic for each one of those, it's going to have to be performed within set criteria. The electronically connected set criteria will be 100% of the time. So if you are key on, engine's not running, disconnect the lambda sensor, immediately it'll ping a code. The same with the heater circuit not working. So now we get down to the two reasons why you're most likely to ping a check emissions fault light. And it's going to be because the engine is either stuck rich or stuck lean, or it's the slow response. And here is why driving it like you stole it or driving it hard is just not going to work at all and is completely incorrect advice. For that diagnostic to run, here's the set criteria, or the entry conditions that the engine management system must meet to run the diagnostic. It must be running lambda 1, and it must already be running lambda 1 within the set authority of fuel correction, either positive or negative. Typically that's lambda 1 minus 20% plus 20%. The coolant temperature must be between a set range, typically 70 to 110. The intake air temperature measured inside the inlet manifold must be a maximum of 90. Engine load measured by volumetric efficiency must be between 20 and 30%, so more or less that's between 20% and 30% pedal. Vehicle speed between 30 and 60 miles an hour. Engine revs between 1000 and 2000 RPM. Greater than 15% fuel volume in the tank, and it must have been running closed loop fuel for a minimum time period, typically 10 seconds. So when all of those variables are true, or within the limits, the engine management system will run the diagnostic, and if your sensor is failing the response time, that square wave isn't being given back in the right pattern, or you're stuck rich or stuck lean because it cannot control your fueling to lambda 1, then it will ping the error light. So if people advise you to drive it like you stole it or drive it hard, then basically you've cleared your fault codes and you're driving outside of that diagnostic range. So the only reason the light isn't coming on is because it isn't allowed to perform the diagnostic, because it's being driven hard. And that's what they've misunderstood. Because if you drove in the conditions where the diagnostic was allowed to run, or that series of criteria that I just mentioned before, then the diagnostic would perform and the light would ping. So by driving hard, they're basically not allowing the test to run and ping the light, which is totally different than driving it hard because somehow that Italian tunes up your car. That strategy can be carried across to most problems with the car. If you've got a particular problem that keeps occurring, you just have to understand the conditions that it takes to enable the diagnostic to run. So if you're trying to find out a problem, you haven't got all of the diagnostic kit like the AMDS laptop, then you can quickly try and get problems to repeat by driving in that area all the time to ping your code, and then you can try and do stuff to diagnose it. Obviously, if you're driving outside the region where the engine management system would run the diagnostic, then the code will never trigger anyway, and you won't get the code to occur quickly enough so that you could then do your diagnostics. You could always just take it to a garage and save the faff, and the garage just plug their diagnostic kit in and solve the problem. But if you want to do it yourself, then just do not drive it like you stole it. Drive it hard, because that isn't going to help whatsoever. Hope you like that question of the week. Really helps us if you can click us a like, give us your comments and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you on the next question of the week.